Well, our guest today is someone, to use a cliche, who has literally worn many hats. She's been an actor, she's been an interior designer, she's an author, she's a columnist, and she's also turned film producer. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Twinkle Khanna to NDTV today. Twinkle, thank you so much for joining us. And we're speaking to you as you launch your third book. So congratulations for that.
Thank you, and it's lovely to be here.
Well, you know, I read the book and I found it really interesting because it seems to be a completely different book from what you have previously written. Definitely very different from Mrs. Funny Bones and, you know, the short stories you had after that. Your writing seems to have evolved quite a bit. Why did you choose the subject that you did? I don't want to reveal too much about what it's about. And how do you think you've changed as a writer?
So I will reveal what it's a little bit about. And Pyjamas Are Forgiving is about a middle-aged woman who goes to a spa to cure her insomnia, and she bumps into her ex-husband and his young wife, and then it's mayhem from then on. When you say that it's changed or the things that I'm writing about have changed, I would not agree, because I think that there is a certain theme that I seem to follow, which is about women and their place in society, in the world. And it was there in Lakshmi Prasad, it's there in Funny Bones, and it's here. So it's pretty much the same theme, it's just different ways of writing it.
No, that's an interesting way of putting it. But, you know, what I found interesting about the book, you know, was that you have that sort of dry sense of humor that comes across in every chapter. But the theme itself, what made you decide to write about this?
Fiction, again, is what we internalize about what's happening in the world around us. And at this point of time, I felt the Me Too movement was very strong. There is also a large ambiguity of consensual sex, and I wanted to touch upon that as well. There's another aspect about how a woman is seen who's successful professionally, but who's single and who's childless, and how the world sees her, and also how she sees herself. And this constant feeling of being inadequate was something I felt that needed to be spoken about and discussed and explored. So, and the other thing was, I think a lot of books are about falling in love, but I thought this would be interesting because it's almost like a flip book that you go through in reverse, and it's how you fall out almost. So I thought that these were all interesting premises.
There's something also about your writing that comes across as refreshingly honest, some would say brutally honest. And where does that come from? Is that like who you are basically, and you channelize that into your writing?
I think I'm somebody who doesn't have much of a filter, and for most of my life that's been a large problem. It was a problem to have opportunities or in the workplace as well. Today I think it's paying off, because even when I'm doing this interview, and what I have to just tell myself again and again is that I have to be myself, and that is good enough for me. That is all I've always capitalized on. If I ever pretended to be somebody else, at some point in this long career in the public eye, I would have slipped.
So you say what you feel, basically.
Unfortunately, I say what I feel.
Does that create trouble sometimes?
You just have to see my Twitter timeline to see, yes, I'm always in some sort of controversy or the other. But I feel that if you can't be yourself, if you can't say what you want, when you're in a position to be able to, then that would be a bit of a shame.
How did you, though, come to this realization that writing is something that clearly seems to be your forte? Because you've had these various roles you've played, and you've done each, I mean, you don't talk about your film career anymore, but you've actually done so many films, I think 17 leading roles, right? So how did you come to that point where you realized that this is what I want to do? I can channelize my energy best through writing.
I think you come to a point in life where you have to decide whether you want to be a Playboy bunny or the one pulling the rabbits out of your hat. And I reached that place. I was anyway not even the right size to be a Playboy bunny, to be honest. It was a gradual progression, but again, words and books have been my entire life. They've been my escape, they've been my solace. You don't reach the halfway mark in life without going through pain and loneliness and grief. And I think it's words that have been my staple to join all these torn bits of myself together. Whether it is as a reader, which I believe I'm a reader more than a writer, or even when I write. It's the way I escape.
But how did you, I mean, did you keep a diary? How did you start writing is the question. It's not, I mean, now you're a regular columnist. You've written 3 books.
Yeah.
You're already working on your next one, I believe. So what was the starting point for that?
When I was very young in boarding school, I started writing poetry. Terrible, terrible poetry. And even now I write poetry, but my editor, Chicky, doesn't let me incorporate it into any of my writing, which is a good thing, I think. And when I was in my early 20s, I finished writing half a book. And after that, I didn't write anything for 20 years. Nothing. Not a diary entry, not a journal, nothing. And when I got an opportunity to write a column, that's what I told the editor at that point, that I don't know if I can write. I haven't written anything for so many years. And all she said was that, you know, you're a reader and you have this strange way of looking at life, and I'm sure you can write. And I remember telling her that millions of people watch cricket doesn't mean they can play. But I gave it a shot. And at that point, I had so much to say that it was relatively easy as compared to what it is now, because as a liberal, I have, you know, 5 things to say, and I'm constantly looking for new ways of saying those same things. And now I struggle to find those new ways.
So let's talk about, you know, just taking off from what you said, you're a liberal, right? And you're also funny.
Yeah.
And a lot of comedians in India today, on a serious note, do think that the space to make fun of everything and everyone has shrunk. Now, firstly, as someone who does write funny columns, do you feel the same way? Do you sometimes think twice about who you're writing about, who you're making fun of? Do you feel that there is a constraint?
I think it's become extremely confining in many ways. I would agree with them. And there is pressure from various areas about trying to curtail that. And sometimes it gets to me. And I did spend one evening sort of rather miserable and depressed and thinking, you know, that I don't have the freedom to do what I want. But next week I got up and regardless of the consequences, I decided I have to write the way I do, and I continued. But is it as easy as it used to be? I don't think so.
But you work through that, as you said.
You have to work through it. It's not even about being brave. I think I'm just foolhardy.
No, but then you also deal with the issue, for instance, of online trolling. And let's talk about that. It's something you face. It's something a lot of women in particular, whether it's in cinema, journalists, all of us have faced. How do you deal with that? I mean, recently you had this whole silly controversy about the Navy uniform in Akshay's film, which was being auctioned, and there was such a online backlash about that. How do you deal with something like that?
When everything that you have to look at, you have to step back, because stepping back gives you a perspective, and that's what I have learned. What's happening today in social media is that we are inundated by so much information, and we have no time to assimilate this information or to amalgamate it into any sort of knowledge. So we are, you know, having information thrown at us and we're flinging it right back. And also, there's never been a time in history when so much information has been available to people who are largely uneducated. And that is what trolling is about. It's people who are not being able to absorb this information, and with very little of it, they're going on rattling around. I think that if there is criticism and it's valid, I like to examine it carefully, because again, invariably, it will reveal something to me.
Well, criticism
about
isn't
myself.
trolling. There's a difference.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, if it's valid. But if it's trolling, I don't really let it affect me anymore.
But
I would stop responding. Yeah, I mean, you know, you have threats all the time of rape and murder and all sorts of things and wild names. But how does it matter? I mean, they're dogs barking, that's all. They're cockroaches running around, and spray hit on them once in a while, and that's it. That's the way I deal with it.
So you largely believe it should be ignored. And you know, there's also this...
I don't even bother complaining about it, because really nothing seems to get done. And I just ignore it.
But there are, you know, people in the film industry, for instance, I've seen lately who've been speaking out more and more on issues, you know, whether it's Swara Bhaskar on, you know, on the Kathua rape story, and the kind of backlash and the vile abuse that she got. I mean, I wanted your perspective on that. Do you think it's good that, finally, movie stars, actors are speaking out on issues that matter, you know, and that should matter, at least to all of us, like the rape of a child? Is that a good thing? Or is it tricky?
I don't think it's tricky. I mean, for me, it affected me on a personal level because I have a young daughter and I went as part of one of the protests and I took part in that. I think it's a wonderful thing that people are being able to speak up, and if you have a public voice, there are people listening to you, you do have a responsibility. And again, it's an individual choice. I feel I have a responsibility, I can't speak for somebody else, to voice concerns. And if because of the platform I have more people listening to me, then I have to also be responsible and be honest about it and contribute in some way.
So would you be happier to see more of Bollywood, I hate that word, but more of the film industry speak out on issues that matter?
No, again you're segregating it and you're saying it's Bollywood. I'm saying people who have a public platform, if they as individuals, every individual is different. Some people are more outspoken, some people are more diplomatic. If people across the board, not just in Bollywood, people in positions of power and privilege do voice their concerns and do bring up issues, then I think it would be a better thing.
And the only reason I ask that is because we often compare the situation here to Hollywood. When you see a George Clooney or you see, you know, other actors there, very sort of politically involved. They're not afraid to make a political statement about their president, for example. We don't see that equivalence here, with some exceptions. Is that a good thing, or would you like evolving. More politically conscious?
I think we're evolving.
Actors?
Everything takes time. They've always been ahead of us in different ways, and we are getting there. But it's a process and it's a progression. You know, we've been a slightly more I would
hesitant.
say almost hesitant, apologetic society, and I think that's changing.
So you're not afraid when you tweet a certain point of view. You're not afraid of backlash, abuse, being called out for being politically inclined one way or another.
Well, no, I think people's opinions are. You see, as a child also, everybody's always had an opinion because of who I was. So either they were really nice to me because of my background, or they were downright nasty. So by this time, I realized that what they think about me, beyond the handful of people in my life, is largely irrelevant.
So you have a thicker skin already.
Yeah, maybe it's a thicker skin, and actually it's getting thinner with age. But yeah, you could say that.
But let me ask you though, you are very obviously, as you put it yourself, liberal. Your husband is not seen as a liberal. He might be a little more right of center. Are you guys very different in your political point of view? Do you often talk about that? Do you have any convergence in your political views?
We have very different political ideologies. We also have different social ideologies, I would say. And in fact, people tease us that in our house, there's Republic TV and NDTV playing together. But what I've also learned, and I wish more people would do that in society about everything, and not just politics, is to learn to tolerate differences. We seem to be very afraid of people who are different from us. Rather than learning something from someone who has another perspective, we seem to shun that. And I think in marriages, in society, we should be. It's a great learning process to have somebody and to talk to people who are completely different from you, and I think that's what I do with him.
But